Good morning and welcome to First Jefferson Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Annie Foerster and I'm minister to this congregation.
Sorry.
Surprise.
Did I start talking too soon?
No? Keep going.
Okay. I'll start over. I'm also a member of CUPS, the Covenant of Unitarian Universalist Pagans.
Soon, aren't they?
Oh, yes, they are. There's going to be an Imbolc celebration on February 5th. That's this Saturday. It's a Gaelic celebration halfway between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. If you'd like to read more about it, just check out your February Courier.
Okay, and there's a sheet on the bulletin board out in the hallway too. And next Sunday is Potluck Sunday. Don't forget to bring a dish to share. And the following Sunday is the day before Valentine's Day, and I think we'll have something for the children and youth that day. Bonnie, we have a lot going on. I haven't been here for a few weeks, and I was surprised to see how many names have been collected to choose for our new identity. So feel free to go out in the hallway and add to that name list if you have an idea of what we might be called. And we're hoping to get even more. Are there any other announcements, Bonnie?
Well, yes, there are. If you would check the Lost and Found, we do have a new Lost and Found out there. So if you see anything or you're missing anything, please check there. This Saturday, in addition to the Imbolc celebration, there's going to be a Harp Concert. It's going to be at lunchtime. So if you'd like to come to that, that was one of the service auction offerings. And it's also, if you'd like to attend, it's $25. The lunch is at 5 and the concert is at 6. And I'm sorry, what? It's a late lunch, yes. So also there's a service, it was a service auction. Also, there is going to be after service a Valentine's Day themed fundraiser, and that's for the flowers, for all these beautiful flowers. You can purchase things like stuffed bears and, of course, flowers. You're probably not like me, they don't go to your home to die. They're probably good. And also you can get some new cups, some coffee cups, because I know you want those.
Okay, then if that's it, let's begin our worship. My hope today is to entertain you and to make you think. But first, let's enjoy this moment as our pianist Misha Bresnev plays Tchaikovsky's Meditation. Misha? I love how the music fills up this room, don't you? May I be no one's enemy, and may I be the friend of that which is eternal and abides.
May I wish for every person's happiness and envy none.
May I never rejoice in the ill fortune of one who has wronged me.
May I, to the extent of my power, give needful help to all who are in want.
May I never fail a friend.
May I respect myself.
May I always keep tame that which rages inside me.
May I custom myself to be gentle and never be angry with others because of circumstance.
May I know good people and follow in their footsteps. Please join me in singing our opening hymn, number 1 in the hymn book, and the words will be on the screen. May nothing evil cross this door. We light our chalice this morning for all the difficulties and rewards of being in community. Let this light symbolize the needs and the hopes of all people. Our needs are diverse, but we all have needs. Food to nourish us, a place to be safe, a community of love, a sense of belonging, a challenge to growth. Our needs are many, just as our lights are many. May we join together to make a larger light, meeting our own needs and those of others. Bonnie, will you lead us into the affirmation?
Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve others in community, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with creation. Thus do we covenant with one another.
You please be seated. My question this morning is about the story, The Ant and the Grasshopper. And the question is this: do you think Aesop got it right? Is that really all there is? And for the story for all ages, Bonnie, you can sit down. I'm going to tell this story briefly, but for the story for all ages, I just want to recap The Ant and the Grasshopper the way that Aesop told it. You're probably familiar with the fable of the ant and the grasshopper, but you might have missed out on remembering some of it. You see, the ant spends his summer gathering food and storing it for the winter. It's hard work, but he doesn't mind. And the grasshopper spends her summer leaping in the grass. It's great fun, and she wants to do it some more. And then winter comes. Winter sets in, and the ant joins his family underground, where they prepare to spend the short, cold days with plenty of food and warmth. And at the first howling of the north wind, the grasshopper knocks at the ant's door and says, "Hey, there's no food or fire out here. How about letting us in?" And the ant says, You spent the summer playing instead of putting food away and for such a day. You should have thought about this in August. Goodbye. And of course, the moral of the story is work first, play later, or pay the consequences. At least that's what Aesop told us. But I have some inside information that I will share with you later. Bonnie, I'm going to let you take the offering.
This week.
Yeah.
So
Your
knowing everything that
grasshoppers
happened,
better be ready.
Yeah, knowing everything that happened last winter, make sure you charge beforehand with things you don't have to heat. But I look out over this congregation and I see familiar faces and I see a scattering of new faces. Jason and I have been out of town and we returned. I did have surgery on my hand and we continued to shelter at home, tried to avoid people. And we've been watching the services on YouTube or on Facebook. But it's exciting to be up here on the chancel and to see the community that gathers here each Sunday. It's satisfying to notice that there is something going on here. There's some revitalized energy, even as COVID continues to challenge us. I'm looking forward to being back. And as you know, each Sunday we share the offering with an organization for three months of Sundays. This quarter, we are gathering money to support the renovation of the playground outside the nursery. It has fallen into disrepair and has become dangerous. And since this playground serves the Sunbury school children as well as our own, this renovation is a community service. The teachers from the school have been meeting with the church members and offering physical help in the rebuilding. No help will be turned down. Feel free to come out on one of those work days if you're handy with a hammer or some other tool. I know you men like your tools. Power tools. So as the greeters pass among you, please remember to be generous. This is for our children and our future.
Please join me in singing the unison response to give. The words will be on the screen and we'll sing it through twice, number 402 in the hymnal. You can rest. Well, you heard me tell the fable that most of us are familiar with. You were listening, weren't you? You remember it, don't you? That's the expurgated version of the story, however, edited to protect our children's tender sensibilities. And since our children are no longer with us, I'm prepared to tell you the truth. This is how the story really played out. You see, there was this aunt who belonged to this large family of workaholics, and who went about all day hauling eggs for hatching, hauling in food for storage against the winter, and hauling out dead ants who had succumbed to exhaustion or been crushed by Bigfoot who walks overhead. Now, this ant did not mind the hard work because the motto of his family was haul until you fall. Work was the norm. What did he know about any other lifestyle but this, except for whispers of that which in his community was called deviant behavior? But this particular ant had what can only be described as an empty feeling. So he ate more than most other ants to fill this empty feeling, and as a result, he was bigger than most of the ants, huge by ant standards, but they loved him because he worked very hard. Now, in the same meadow lived a grasshopper and her family. The mother grasshopper was an artist and a gourmand. She had very high standards. She played only in zoysia, and she ate only white clover blossoms. The father was a good-hearted chap, loved to click his knees and dance, didn't know a stranger. He would give you the wings off his back if you asked for them. And their daughter was a fine specimen of genetic fusion. She had a little of both of her parents in her and a lot of style all her own. I mean, she was the first grasshopper in the meadow to achieve a double backflip off a blade of crabgrass. But there were times, after the applause, when she asked herself, is this all there is? Well, the ant and the grasshopper didn't know each other, of course. Why should they? He went to private school. She dropped out of school to join the chorus line of Fiddler on the Roots. But one day, as fate would have it, the two of them were chewing their way across the meadow and bumped into one another. I think it must have been one of those times when he was feeling empty and she was sighing, is this all there is? Because they didn't do what most ants and grasshoppers do, which is to avoid one another. They apologized, they exchanged names, and they started to talk, and by sundown, they were very good friends. So they met frequently after that. They exchanged life stories, and then philosophies, and then theologies, and then they began creating possibilities together. They were fascinated with and sometimes shocked by the other's experiences and opinions, but they both agreed they could see the potential in them for expanding their own lives and meeting their own inner needs. So to make a long story short, they developed an idea for a planned, low-maintenance community in which ants and grasshoppers would live together. The ants would provide the training and expertise for food storage and home building, while the grasshoppers would introduce the arts and the finer things of life, offering beauty and joy in return for year-round security. Well, the grasshopper took the ant home first, and they explained the plan to her parents. Her father laughed at them and went out to have a cup of bubbling clover with the boys. Her mother was rude and said the ant smelled of formic acid and she didn't want him in her house. So they went to the ant's hive, and that's when the trouble really began. On entering the small opening in the ground, the grasshopper experienced her first ever claustrophobic anxiety attack. Flailing her knees in panic, she managed to destroy half a nursery and a quarter of the food storage vaults, in addition to crushing 3 nurse ants and 1 warrior ant. Well, the other warriors rushed to the scene, and before explanations and apologies could be made, they subdued the thrashing grasshopper and enslaved her far below ground, where she went quite mad for lack of sunshine. And when word reached her father, He gathered a group of his buddies for a raid, and they managed to do further damage to the ant community. In retaliation, the ants sent out hunting parties and captured even more grasshoppers to enslave below ground. And by the end of the summer, there was not one member of either family left alive. Now, some say that this true story is the basis for Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Some say he told it better than I do. But what I told you is the truth without any of the romanticism. So let us have a moment of silence and respect for those about whom the story was told. That's enough. Thank you. Thank you. It's good to have the truth sometimes. Every Sunday we take a moment to share other stories like this personal one. And I do not see the book, so apparently no one wrote a story in the book. Let's see, what else might I tell you about what's going on here? I told you already about the name change, requests for new names. I think probably all the stories that we have today are stories kept close to the heart or told in pairs. Are you going to look for the book? Okay, thank you. So that you tell to one another. So in the meantime, let us take a moment to share in silence the consideration of this beloved community and how many ants and grasshoppers are in it and how well we get along. Hunter's Aunt Dolores Sims died last week of COVID-19 at the age of 94. Roz asked that we please keep her and her family in your thoughts. Roz, we are so sorry. It must be something very sad to consider that she had struggled along for 94 years in this darned pandemic. Let us be in silence a moment longer. I also have a guided meditation to share with you as we consider this beloved community. Let this house be quiet. Let our minds be quiet. Let the quietness of the hills, the quietness of deep waters be also in us. So quiet that the noise of passing events and present anxieties, of random recollections and wandering thoughts is stilled. So quiet that the marvelous stillness is like music. So quiet that we feel the very being which is the life of us all. So quiet that we are renewed and we feel at one with others at home in a tabernacle of stillness. So quiet that we sense the ripples of this pool of quietness and healing pass through us and out to the furthest star. Misha. Thank you.
Let us rejoice in the poetry of spring, the pageantry of summer, the soft intonations of autumn, and the austere majesty of winter.
For the beauty of the season, we give thanks.
Let us rejoice in the enchantment of wonder, the allurement of mystery, the appeal of beauty, the challenge of goodness, the sacrifice strength of love.
For the glory of creation, let us give thanks.
Let us rejoice in the sustaining strength of those near and dear, those understanding. Love brings serenity to our restless souls and assures us that our lives have value to others.
For the love of family and friends, we give thanks.
Let us rejoice in our work, through which we have fellowship with unknown toilers in mine and field, in factory and office, whose strength has redeemed us from want, the fruit of whose labor is our rich inheritance.
For the energies of hand and heart, we give thanks.
Let us rejoice in the dreamers of every land and age, whose undying faith has woven a fadeless tapestry of hope, wherein we behold a pattern of the better world yet to be.
For the prophetic vision, let us give thanks.
Let us rejoice in the unbought privilege of life, wherein human souls have eternal worth.
And for the awesome gifts of life itself, let us give thanks. And please join me in singing our middle hymn, number 322, Thanks Be for These. We're going to end there? That's fine. There's too many verses to this song. Thank you. Please be seated. There were 3 more. That's okay. We'll sing them next time. And thank you, Bonnie, for helping me today.
Thank you.
You know, sometimes I look back on my earlier journals and I read what I have written there, and I know it isn't polite to laugh at the person I once was, but sometimes I just have to. I mean, there's this one entry I came across recently from those very early adult years that almost made me blush for my childishness of that time. And it began like this: I am not different. Why do people always tell me I am different? I'm just like everybody else. Now, I realize what a compliment it was to be thought different, unusual, self-thinking with my own opinions. Did you ever, though, want to be just like everyone else? I think it's a stage we all have to go through. Some people get over it when they make it through adolescence, and some of them, like me, take a little bit longer. I think I was probably in my mid-20s at the time when I wrote that page, and I was still blending in like crazy, very shy, trying not to be noticed, trying to be like whoever I was with. I just wanted people to like me, and I thought that's the way you did it. And one of the strange things that brought me face to face with my own differences was my love of taking tests. You know, the kind that appear in magazines or on websites to show what kind of personality or mindset you have. And in the results of many of these tests lay proof of my differentness, for I often found myself scoring at the edges of the bell curve. For instance, in hand preference tests, I score about 60-40 for right-left preference. The peak of the bell is about 75-25 for your dominant hand. In other words, most people's dominant hand is truly dominant. Mine isn't. I mean, I deal cards with my left hand. I couldn't do it any other way, but I'm right-handed. I do a lot of things with my left hand, strange things, but here's another one. I don't have a dominant brain hemisphere either. I can shift between left brain analytical and right brain creative with ease according to the tests that prove such things to be true. Both my brains are equally strong. And on the Myers-Briggs instrument, which highlights one's preference for being alone or being in company of others, introvert, extrovert, now I score somewhere right in the middle. And the same with thinking, feeling. And it depends on where I am and who I'm with. But I'm used to my differences now, and I would like to think that these statistically unusual scores set me apart to be extremely successful in whatever I do, and utterly joyful in whatever comes my way. However, and it's a big however, analysts insist that the 2 or 3% of us who have these scores at the edges and have 1 or 2 common tendencies that don't bode well. We are either mugwumps, people who sit on the fence with their mug on one side and their wump on the other, unable to make a decision, or we shift into extremes to compensate for our lack of differentiation and dominance, and nobody can tell where we are half the time. I tend to be that latter type, I think, which can be confusing to others. And to use a familiar metaphor, when I am an ant, I work as hard as any ant in the hive. And when I'm being a grasshopper, no one leaps higher than I. In a way, I'm still saying, I'm just like you, only more so. And I'm also just like you and you and you. What I am is a chameleon. But I've gotten used to it, and I think so have most of the people who know me. I hope. But I think the ant and the grasshopper in my true story share that same bell curve position out on the edges. I think that's one of the reasons they were able to create a shared vision of community. And what's more, I think that chameleons of one kind or another often end up in Unitarian Universalist churches. I think that's why we feel so comfortable when we get here. Everywhere else we are out on the edge, but here we don't feel so different, or it doesn't matter that we are. And with that leap of faith, I come at last to the point of this self-indulgent rambling, to introduce us to who we are. A planned community of ants and grasshoppers, chameleons, frogs, and cats, some of whom I will introduce to you later. We are fascinating people, and complex and different. Look around you. You can pick out the ants among us, those who just glow with pure joy when they're asked to do some enormous task like coordinate a fundraiser or teach a room full of Unitarian Universalist children. I mean, these people aren't fooled by the oxymoron work party. They come to paint or plant gardens. They come to set up chairs or haul out trash. They sit in meetings and they discuss the impossible and the improbable with the intent of making them change their definitions. I mean, these ants fill up our treasuries and our pantries, and they keep the labels straight on all the doors and drawers. And you know the high-leaping grasshoppers who bring tears to your eyes with a song, who paint pictures with their words, who teach us how to hug, who drop everything to look in on the sick, who raffle off quilts or knit scarves, who point to the future with suggestions of possibility and potential, and who bring rainbows and starshine indoors for us to treasure. They create our dreams, and they carry us along into them on their very backs. And when we speak in theological paradoxes like unity and diversity, we're talking about ants and grasshoppers, about chameleons and cats, you know, the ones that can't be herded, but go their own direction, sing their own songs, and yet somehow manage to create community with a purpose and a congregational choir and a melody all its own. Now, this menagerie is the great joy of Unitarian Universalism. But I have to tell you, such diversity also can be our weakness. You see, ants do smell of formic acid or something similar. Grasshoppers do make a shambles of neat little pathways. Chameleons who can't make up their minds or who shift back and forth confuse everyone else. And oh, when cats need to be petted, their minds are not on their work or goals or missions. Even Noah did not envision an ark full of us. And time and circumstances has proven that unless we maintain an awareness of our creative differences and learn to live with our ideological extremes, at some point or another, we drop out, or we burn up, or we end up in conflict with one another. Now, there have been lots of studies on church conflicts, why they happen, how to avoid them, how to manage them if they occur. But some years ago, the Alban Institute, an organization that studies churches, decided to study healthy churches to learn what they did to hold conflict at bay. And what they discovered is that successful churches have a large menagerie as unsuccessful ones, but they operate in the tensions between the extremes. Now let me spell that out a little bit more. Extremes in leadership style can cause great conflict. I'm sure you've seen it happen at one time or another. One kind of leader manages details, allocates resources, creates step-by-step plans that eliminate risks. You always know where you are with this kind of leader, whether you agree with them or not. But another kind of leader looks at the big picture, at the long term, and sees possibilities that will entail some risk, but which have the potential for enormous payoffs. And these two types can barely tolerate being in the same room with one another without a covenant. But when they learn to work together, living in that tension between their styles, they learn what Alban Institute called managing the vision. They take risks, but not huge risks. They look ahead, but they stay connected to tradition as well. They learn that either or can become both and. Every time a new board is elected, I sit back and I look at the possible tensions. You want some tension, otherwise nothing would change. But you want the leaders to understand that they run a democracy, not an oligarchy. We have to have rules, bylaws, for instance, but we need to be able to bend them when we find it necessary. Otherwise, we begin to treat our guidelines like creeds. You know, when I first came here 3.5 years ago, I asked you during a service to tell me your dreams of the future, but I also asked, what are your current disappointments? And one of the things that kept being repeated was that attendance had been dropping, and it was sad to see all the empty chairs in the sanctuary. So I leaped into my ant role or whatever it was, and I said, let's take out some of the chairs and store them until we can begin to grow again. Oh, no, I was told by someone. We have a map in the closet, inside of the closet door, that shows how the chairs need to be set up. What if, I asked, we drew another map? We'd have one for large events and another one for smaller events. And we managed to find the middle of that tension, to work between those two extremes. We kept the tradition, and we created something new. And it worked. The time to build community is during good times, of course, times of success or celebration. I remember in September last year when we first returned from the pandemic shutdown, how strong this community felt, how warmly we greeted one another. And I think we're still in that coming back together frame of mind, and this is a great time to look ahead to the future, to reflect on potential and differences. We're going to change our name. I don't know if that's going to cause conflict. I hope not. We've planned for it not to. We already agreed we would, however, and we're going to ask ourselves who we are and who we want to be. There might be some different answers there. And along with that, this year we're going to review our mission statement because that says in writing who we think we are. And we are going to rewrite our vision statement because we already have gone beyond the limits of the existing one. Will there be disagreements? I hope so. I really do. Because that's where the creativity comes in. But we need to remember that we are a community of ants and grasshoppers, chameleons and cats. And if someone disagrees with us, it isn't because they don't like us and what we stand for. It's because they're asking for clarification. Sometimes in conflict we feel attacked and we take the extreme position to defend it. It's uncomfortable there. That's why people tend to avoid conflict, avoid resolving it even. But living in the tension between extremes is being willing to disagree with civility, to listen to one another, to negotiate, even to consider changes in our own positions. So let me introduce you to yet another animal in our menagerie. If you were to toss a frog, heaven forbid, and this is metaphorical, you understand, into a pot of very hot water, the frog would react immediately by leaping out to safety. However, if you put a frog into a pot of cool water and light a fire under it, setting aside the question of who does these kinds of things to find out if they are true or not, the frog, they tell me, will become extremely lethargic as the water gets gradually warmer, and by the time the temperature is at a dangerous level, the frog will be so relaxed he will be unable to leap to safety. You see, to live between the tensions in conflict is to stay in the heat just long enough to figure out how to turn off the fire. Otherwise, we're all likely to get scalded. Whether we are inclined to leap or snooze, whether or not we try to avoid conflict or wade in with both fists flying. There is not, I think, any major conflict on the horizon. If there is, nobody's told me, and I prefer you keep it that way, but realistically, no, please tell me. The potential for disagreement is always high in a growing, dynamic church, and isn't that the kind of church that we want to be? So we best learn how to deal with it, how we will react. We must continue to accept new members with open arms, grow new programs so that even more new members are tempted to join us, create tension that is bouncy, not binding. And whether you come to church for intellectual stimulation or to reach out to help others because you seek a community of like-minded people, or because you have nothing better to do on Sunday morning, or because you are seeking answers to life's questions, we all have to be in relationship. We have to listen to one another, even if we discover that the other is an ant to our grasshopper, or a grasshopper to our ant. We have often had trouble asking ourselves and one another theological questions, those important personal questions of faith, because we either have rejected a theological language we disagreed with, or we were never given the vocabulary to deepen our faith. This is a new curriculum. This is a new day. I believe we are never too old to learn. I believe that the responsibility to keep on growing intellectually and spiritually is a moral imperative. Living in the tensions between the extremes is being willing to disagree with civility, to listen to one another, and to negotiate changes in position. Now, I do not say these things to scare you or tell you that the worst will come to pass, that conflict will occur sooner or later. Quite the contrary. I have worked with a number of church communities, and I know from experience that facing negative possibilities as well as dreaming up some new positive ones really generates community. I speak of conflict to you only to remind you of what I already know from having lived with you for more than 3 years. That you are indeed a community of ants and grasshoppers with all the differences and the potential that that entails. It's what makes you unique. It's what makes you fun to be with. It's what makes you you. New is all around us, exciting and disturbing. There will be times when the ants and the grasshoppers disagree. If you listen lovingly to one another, if you live in the tensions and don't run away from them, you will be a true community, stronger than ever, elastic, not brittle. So store up grain for the winter, but don't forget to save room in the barn to have a dance. Life abounds, whether we will or want it. And the least we can do is try to be there together. Please join me in singing our closing hymn, number 347, Gather the Spirit. Who had written this, and was written by Jim Scott, who is one of the Unitarian Universalist hymn writers. And on the opposing page, the song written by Carolyn McDade, another Unitarian Universalist. And I think, no wonder we have such glorious communities. We write our own music. Our chalice has burned as a signal, a sign of this beloved community. And I know that we can extinguish it because we take its light home with us in our hearts and our minds until we are together again. Henry David Thoreau, another Unitarian, wrote, "If the day and the night are such that you greet them with joy, and life emits a fragrance like flowers and sweet-scented herbs, is more elastic, more starry, more immortal, that is your success. All nature is your congratulation, and you have cause momentarily to bless yourself. So may it be in all our lives." Please join us now for coffee and conversation in the library behind.